everyone. Welcome to our Cybersecurity Summit. This is our first virtual 2020 summit, and we're so excited to have you here. My name is Kim Medina. I'm the VP of Development and Operations here at the Chamber, and I'm excited to kick off the summit today. I want to start off with some thank yous. First, today, our presentation would not be possible without the support of our wonderful sponsors. So I want to take a minute to recognize them. As you can see, our gold sponsors are Brock & Company, CPAs, Plante Moran. Our silver sponsor is Comcast. Bronze sponsor, Milner Technologies. Event sponsor, Alpha Graphics, the Better Business Bureau, BizWest, Signorama, and Technical Frameworks. Again, thank you to these sponsors. We are tweeting today, so please do join with us at NoCoCybersecurity, hashtag NoCoCybersecurity, to join in the conversation. In addition, all of our resources, all the materials from today will be available at the Fort Collins Area Chamber website following the presentation. In addition, we will have questions, so please join in the chat box during the presentation to drop your questions for our presenters, as well as we will be sharing promotions and resources there during the summit. We want to make the most of your time today, so let's go right to it. I'm honored to turn the presentation over to Chris Otto, partner at Plante Moran, who will be our MC for the morning. Chris is the office managing partner of the Fort Collins Plante Moran office, where he specializes in helping a wide range of family-owned and closely held businesses in manufacturing and distribution, real estate, healthcare, publishing, and other industries as they reach their goals. He is an expert in fraud prevention, forensic accounting, and litigation support. Chris is honored to be on a board or committee member of many worthy organizations in Northern Colorado, such as the Community Foundation of Northern Colorado, the Fort Collins Foothills Rotary Club, Summit Stone Health Partners, and the Fort Collins Area Chamber of Commerce. Please welcome Chris.
Thank you, Kim. There we go. Thank you, Kim, and good morning and welcome, everyone. I am pleased to join you as the MC of the 2020 Cybersecurity Summit. Obviously, we would have loved, like last year, to have been in person, as we are with all these events, but we're doing this today, and I think this will be as effective, and you'll walk away with some great information. Cybersecurity has been and will continue to be a point of concern for every business, large and small, and I don't think, well, I probably am stealing somebody's thunder when I say it's not a question of if you're going to have to deal with one of these issues. It's really a question of when. And hopefully some of the information you get today will help you do that. Plante Moran is among the nation's largest accounting, tax, consulting, and wealth management firms and provides a full line of service to organizations in the following industries, as Kim had alluded to: manufacturing, distribution, financial services, service healthcare, private equity, public sector, and real estate construction. But what we want to really do is present some great speakers. And so I want to jump to that really quick. And to kick things off this morning, I'm pleased to introduce Kevin Taylor, a fellow at Comcast. Kevin is a Comcast fellow focused on cybersecurity and fraud protection at Comcast. He has been granted 8 US patents spanning security, control systems, and cryptographic keying. In his current role, Kevin leads the Comcast response to cyber-based fraud. He is an industry veteran of 35 years. In his previous roles, he led Comcast to an all-digital video delivery system. He is the father of 3 children, has 3 grandchildren who are the joy of his life. So with that, I'd like to welcome Kevin.
All right. Thank you, Chris. I am very pleased to be here. And as you can tell, I'm kind of an old guy. But the other thing we didn't mention is I live here in Colorado. And so I am so excited to be meeting with my friends up in Fort Collins. And as you can tell, behind me, I have a map of the Colorado 14ers, as well as a map of Colorado drawn in the style of Lord of the Rings. So I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. And today I'm going to talk to you about the virtual neighborhood. You know, our world has changed, as we all know, and many of us have grown up in this virtual world. And a lot of times we think of these physical and virtual worlds as very different things. You know, we think of the virtual world sort of as a scene from the Matrix, you know, but that's not quite what it is. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how the virtual world relates to the physical world and what that means from a cybersecurity perspective. So let's start on our journey here. And, you know, a map of Fort Collins. This is what I can go get on Google, and I can know where your businesses are. I can know where your houses are. I mean, we're used to this. But let me take you into another place where we look at the virtual neighborhood and start to see what it looks like, you know. And out there in this virtual neighborhood, there's tools like Shodan. And most of you probably never heard of Shodan, but it's a tool that security researchers and bad guys use, you know, to understand their targets. And so I created a free account on this, and I typed in Fort Collins. And what can I tell from this virtual map of Fort Collins? Well, the first thing that you'll notice is that there's 3,722 IP addresses that are on the internet, so they can be seen by anybody, and they're most likely modem interfaces. I'll note the other thing is, notice the HTTPS. What that means is that's a website and it's encrypted, which is a good thing. You know, somebody's protecting, or at least 1,828 companies are protecting their assets out there. But notice the HTTP 8080 and HTTP, those are websites or web interfaces that are not encrypted, okay? So just by typing in Fort Collins, I now know this about your businesses and your services that have a virtual presence. And for those of you that are wondering, the 4567 is actually another kind of cable modem interface page that's out there. So this is the kind of tools that are out there. Now, let me make an observation about the virtual neighborhood, okay? Number one, distance doesn't matter. You know, you are as close virtually, you know, to the students at CU that might be hacking as you are to the Russian mafia that might decide to take interest. So in this virtual world, there really isn't a concept of distance. You're as close to anybody else on the planet as you are to somebody who's close to you physically. So let's talk a little bit more about what we can tell here. You know, it looks like there's 5 different providers of service and of internet services in Fort Collins, City of Fort Collins, Comcast Cable, CenturyLink, Rise Broadband, and Comcast Business. And so again, I've been to Fort Collins, but all of this is out on this virtual map. What else can we discover? Well, this is interesting. There are 78 PlayStations, and I would bet they're at the university, you know, that have been connected directly to the internet. There's a handful of Unix machines, you know, and some other routers and other things. And then the other thing that I see that jumps out at me here is Apache is something that runs a web server. You know, OpenSSH is something that you use to connect to your computer. The NGINX is a load balancer. NTPD is what synchronizes your computer with time. And the Microsoft IIS is used for websites. So again, you know, whether you're the interested party is in, you know, at the university there, or Russia or Ukraine or China or whatever, these are the kind of things that they can see without even doing any work yet, okay? So let's continue down, and let me show you a little bit more. Well, actually, let me tell you a little bit more about how this happens. Basically, every day, these sites like Shodan, and there's about 4 others, they come to your IP address, your front door, and they knock on it. And if anybody opens it, they'll interview them and see what they got. And then they'll go around to the side window and knock on that and look through that. And they will go around your virtual location every day to see what's there. And then they put this in this big database, and it just kind of sits out there. And this really isn't the bad guys doing this. This is just people that are indexing the internet. But this is, one of the takeaways I would have for you is you're getting a virtual visitor every day that is just looking around to see what you have. And what they do is this first one, I chose an IP address at random, and they can see what protocols you're running, what kind of things, what ports you have open. So this particular IP address, which is somebody's IP address up in Fort Collins, is running, it has port 7547 open and port 8080. Port 8080 is a web interface. It's not encrypted. It's probably used for configuring this device, whatever it might be. And this is the kind of information that the attackers have about your system, okay? And so I just want you to realize that every day these guys come by and they knock on your door and they index what you have on your system. So let's talk a little bit about the dark side and what happens. So I thought I would share sort of two stories, and there's so many of them out there. There's many to select from, but the one I decided to share today is about one of the world's largest natural gas and oil companies in the world, and one of the most profitable companies in the world. Back in 2012, they had about 50,000 employees and about 40,000 computers. In May 2012, one of their employees clicked on a phishing link and allowed the attackers in. And the attackers spent about 3 months looking around and planning their attack. And on August 15th, 2012, at 9:08 in the morning, they posted a message on a thing called Pastebin. It's kind of a message board that hackers use. And it was from the Cutting Sword of Justice. And they warned what they were going to do. 2 hours later, their attack started. And within a few hours, 35,000 of those 40,000 computers, their hard drives had been wiped. So there were no employee lists, there were no contact lists, there was no email, there was no data left, no financials. It was all gone, and it all happened within a few hours. As this started to go down, of course, it took people a little bit of time to realize what had happened. And they eventually disconnected themselves from the internet. And it took them 3.5 months to recover and hundreds of millions of dollars. The company is Saudi Aramco. And this is one of the largest attacks against a company that the world has ever seen. And the damage was just enormous. At the end of the day, it was likely Iran who did this. So this is a nation state attack. And one of the reasons I bring it up here, one of the things that we see in the cybersecurity world is these tools and capabilities that get created by nation states as they attack each other get co-opted by the criminals to attack us, to attack you. And the other thing the second story is about a pair of program authors called GandCrab. And these guys are really interesting because it was only about 4 or 5 years ago that they went into business. They created what is called ransomware as a service. So the bad guys could come to them, get the tools and the capabilities to do ransomware, and then and they would pay a small cut of that to these guys. And then the attackers would actually use this to attack you and others with ransomware. After a few years of doing this, they decided to retire. They had made $2 billion. And so as they had made their announcement that they were going to retire, this is what they had to say. We successfully cashed this money and legalized it in various spheres of white business, both in real life and on the internet. We are glad to work with you, but as it is written above, all good things must come to end. We are leaving for a well-deserved retirement. We have proven that by doing evil deeds, retribution does not come. And so as you think about your cybersecurity and the risks that are associated with you, most of the time it really is about the money. They want your money in some way. So let's start there. As you think about your cybersecurity posture, what is the value of your data? You know, is it customer data? Is it intellectual property? You know, and how should you protect that? What's the value of your business? You know, what can be gained from your customers? Can your business or systems be used to make money or get at other people? You know, and that's really important, because sometimes it's not your business that the bad actors are after. Maybe they really just look at you as a vehicle to get at somebody else. And a really good example of this is in the Home Depot breach. It was actually HVAC company that the attackers originally had gotten in through, you know, in attacking that organization. So realize that it's about the money, and you should think about that. The next thing is plan for when, not if. You know, as we saw earlier, if you have any type of web presence, it's already out there. It's already indexed. It's already available. And if there's vulnerabilities or other issues on your system, the fact that you haven't been hacked really is just because there's so many other people out there. And, you know, but at some point, somebody's going to come along and they're going to find you. Okay. So you need to think about that, because it will happen to you. And what is your plan? And so as you leave the seminar, one of the things I would encourage you is to go back to your business and just look around and say, hey, if 5 out of my 10 computers went down, or if all of my computers went down, or you know, I was DDoSed and nobody could access my, you know, my website, what would that mean for me? Okay, think and think worst case. Okay, you know, because this is all about your risk and what you need to do about it. So think about your particular space there, and then take action. And when I say take action, I don't mean go spend big dollars in trying to secure everything. Methodically look at where your risks are, what the things are that are important to you, and then put together a plan that helps you protect yourself and your business against these types of attacks. I wanted to talk just a little bit about credentials, and I know Scott is going to talk more about this later, but I just want to make a couple of comments from you know, kind of the high level here. The first one is credential complexity and reuse. Just to share with you, in 2020, here's the top 20 common passwords. You know, so don't use these. And there's many companies out there that go and look at these, and the hackers all have the list of the most common credentials that are out there. So be careful in how you choose your password and what that looks like. The second thing is reuse. One of this world that we live in, most attackers do not get into your account and your systems because the credential, well, actually, I'm going to change my mind now. They get in sometimes because they're too weak, But when you take the appropriate cautions and have a nice complex password and you reuse that across multiple sites, when one of those sites gets breached, that data goes, that password goes out in a credential spill. The bad guys pick that up and they test those credentials against all of the big companies. They test it against Comcast. They test it against all the credit cards, all, you know, Amazon, all of the banks, all of the airlines. And so they're looking to see, did you reuse that credential anywhere along the lines where they can now use that to get into another company. And that's what we mean by credentials in the wild. There's a whole ecosystem out there that's about discovering your credentials either via phishing or via these credential spills that happen out there, and trying to monetize those. You know, there's a whole ecosystem that lives on that. Compromised credentials. In fact, I just got a note the other day from United that I had tried to log into my United account, and I was not, and I filled the credential, you know, the security questions, and I'm going, well, that's funny, that wasn't me. And so I went and dug into that. Sure enough, somebody had from a breach had discovered one of my passwords. And it's one that back in the old days, before I was more sophisticated in this area, I had reused, and they had taken it and tried it on United, and it had worked. And it was just the fact that they were not able to get past the security questions that really kind of saved me. When I changed that credential, I changed it to something completely different. And let me tell you why I did that. One of the things that we have seen over and over, if somebody has a credential, and let's say that I have a credential, Kevin1234, and then I get breached, or I'm concerned that, and I'm ready to change that credential. If I change it to Kevin1235, the bad guys are going to guess it, particularly after a breach like that. You know, once they know what your original credential was, they will test variants around that until they discover exactly what to see if they can guess what you changed it to. So when you think you have been compromised, make sure you change your credential to something completely different. So that's enough about the credentials. I want to talk, just understand your risk, your business. Excuse me. Understand your risk. This is about your business, and each of your businesses is going to have unique risk related to the kind of services that you're providing. So think about your risk in that context. What about your customers? What about your data? And what about your technical infrastructure? One of the things that we see out there in the cybersecurity space is, again, sometimes the attacks are, about ransomware and things like that. But sometimes it's just about taking over your computers to do crypto mining, to do PBX hacking, to use those as tools in doing DDoS attacks. So sometimes they just want to borrow your infrastructure to use that to make money somewhere else. So understand what your particular risks are. And then let's talk a little bit about danger in the virtual neighborhood. In the physical neighborhood, you worry about extortion, people coming to you and extorting money for protection, the kind of stuff that mobs do. In the virtual world, exactly the same thing exists. Occasionally businesses will be approached and basically, threatened to have their internet presence taken down. And if you don't comply and pay, they'll DDoS you, they'll attack your website and take it offline. And this is kind of a common way that these attackers, try to extract money out of people. Ransomware, I think we probably all know what that is, but again, it's another way of extracting money out of you. Data theft, really trying to get at this information about people, because that has value on the dark web. And just to share, these credentials that we talked about, when a credential and information related to that credential gets sold on the dark web, it kind of goes from $2 to $10, per credential set, depending on how much information is associated with that credential. We've mentioned the resource use, crypto mining and DDoS attacks, using your phone system to basically make high toll calls out there, and the hackers getting a cut of that service. And then there's the standard fraud, money transfer, those kinds of things. And the thing to remember that in the virtual neighborhood, these attackers may be physically very distant from you, but in the virtual neighborhood, they're right next door. So what does this mean? In the virtual neighborhood, us security types, we have all kinds of words and terminology for these things that we do. And I wanted to just talk about 4 of those to wrap up this presentation. The first of all is penetration testing. As we've seen in the virtual neighborhood, it's actually quite mapped out and really well understood. Any IP address that you have out there is already indexed, and any service that the bad guys can see is already known. Penetration testing is where you pay a white hat hacker to take that information in to see if they can get in your front door and your windows, so that you know what your risk is. Vulnerability management. Every day there are new vulnerabilities discovered in common software that you're probably using. Vulnerability management really is nothing more than trying to keep on top of those patches and those updates, because as we've seen, the attackers, within a day or two of a vulnerability becoming available, they can go find all of the servers, basically in the world, that are using that software. So it's important for you as a business owner to make sure that somebody's taking care of updating and patching your infrastructure to keep you protected. Security operations, just like you have a physical alarm system that you arm when you leave your place of business every day, you need a security operations center that's monitoring your IT infrastructure to make sure that, when the bad guys do attempt to get in, or when they do get in, that you notice and that somebody can take action. One of the kind of sad statistics within the cybersecurity world is the fact that most breaches, usually the attacker is on the system for several months, typically 3 to 6 months before they're discovered. So these attackers really do get into the system and can spend a lot of time there before before they're discovered. And then security hygiene. This really is, this concept of, in the physical world, are you locking the doors and shutting the windows and making sure they're locked and the alarm is turned on? What kind of security hygiene do you have that you should be running for your business? And with that, thank you very much. And questions?
Yeah. Well, Kevin, thank you for that insightful presentation. And yes, you're right. We do have about 5 minutes for questions. And so please type your questions into the chat feature on the screen. Sorry. Yeah. So Sorry, we had maybe an issue there. Thank you, Kevin, for that presentation. And we do have about 5 minutes for presentation or for questions, sorry, in the Q&A. Just please type your questions into the chat feature of your screen. And then those questions, Kim will help me and get those questions to me. I do have one question that came in early. And this question obviously is for you, Kevin. What does the future workforce look like in cybersecurity? And what kind of skills are needed?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So I'd kind of lead that off and say, from a cybersecurity perspective, right now there's enormous lack of cybersecurity professionals, and so these days it's a very needed position and type of skills that we need out there. I would say in general terms, there's what I would call the cybersecurity operations side. And this is people that are doing the vulnerability management, the patching, the security operations, and could really, they're very technical, but also very, very methodical in the work that they do, okay? The second part is what I would call product security. As companies build products or systems or servers that rely on technology, which almost all products do, we need security engineers that can look at those things and really understand the security risk and work with the development teams to protect those products against the type of attacks that that they'll see out there. And it's interesting, is at least as I sort of generally work in this space, there's sort of the attacks against infrastructure, and then there's for companies like Comcast and many others that create products that live in the home, there are the attacks against those products in the homes, and so we need people that can look at those devices and look at those systems, identify those security vulnerabilities, and fix those and protect and help protect us and everybody against those kinds of attacks. Yes, so hopefully that answers your question.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you for that, Kevin, too. And obviously, I think what I would just offer to everyone that's asking questions or maybe doesn't have a chance to ask a question, I'm sure that all our presenters are happy to answer questions after the presentation too, if somehow that doesn't, we don't get the question answered. But I do have another question here as well for Kevin. What's the first thing a small company should do in terms of cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think that really comes down to looking at your business and deciding what would be of value to an attacker. And secondly, what would really hurt you if it was taken down. So let's say that you're a home-based company, and the most important thing that you have is your list of customers. Then my first observation to you is to make sure that you have an online copy of that. Think about if somebody got into your computer and ransomwared it, and you could not get access to it, and maybe you even pay the ransomware and you still can't get access to it. What's the important data for you? On the other hand, if let's say you're a restaurant, and obviously because of COVID, so much of that ordering has moved online. Do you have you built your website yourself? Do you have protection against DDoS? Is that part of your IT infrastructure protected in such a way that should somebody decide to DDoS you, either to extort money, or sometimes these attackers do it just because they can, but have you put the proper protections in to make sure that critical part of your business is kept alive during an attack? So it really kind of depends on the business and what type of things you do. And so I think you as the business owner just need to think about, what risk do I have? If I was under attack, Is that internet connection the most important thing? Is my data, and customer database? What are the most important things that I need to protect?
Okay. Great. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, thank you, Kevin, for that. Questions are coming in, and so definitely keep them coming, and we want to be here for those. Another one, kind of following along a lot of what you were talking about, Kevin, is just how important is employee training?
Employee training is so important, and it's interesting. In large companies, we've gotten a lot better about training our employees about phishing, and but I would say for small and medium-sized companies, that's also really important, because I'll tell you, so many of these really kind of devastating attacks actually start with a phishing email. And let's talk about phishing. Sometimes there's the general phishing where they send out an email that has misspelled words, or things that you can look in and you can see and you can go, wow, that just doesn't feel right. Don't click on the link. But then there's this thing called spear phishing, and maybe you in your business are an important person. And if somebody takes interest in you, they can craft a spear phish. And what that is an email that is crafted to you based on knowledge that they can gain about you and your contacts, that they send to you, and it's so personalized that you're almost inevitably going to click on that. So that kind of training is really important. In fact, one of the things I haven't talked about is, for example, physical penetration testing. If you're like in a hospital or doctor's office or things like that, where you have very sensitive data that nobody should gain physical access to, there are in-person, shall we say, attackers that will pretend to be people that they aren't, to show up into your, into your facility and try to get at that data. And so, as we talked about penetration testing within the security world, there's kind of the virtual penetration testing, and can you protect yourself from those external attacks? But there's also penetration testing where somebody will purposely show up at your organization and test your physical security to make sure that a bad guy could not get inside of that. And so making your people aware and have training in these areas is really, really important. And I can tell you, being able, within reason, to be able to spot these type of phishing emails is really important. I remember one that I saw a couple of years ago was crafted in such a way that it actually looked really good, and the only thing that gave it away to me was I noticed that in the to line, every name in there was in alphabetical order, and I'm Kevin Taylor, so it was all T-type names, and I looked at that and I go, okay, that's not right. This is a phishing email, and that was the only thing that gave it away. Actually, maybe one other thing there is you, as the executives and owners of the company, need to be trained in all of this. One of the, shall we say, common attacks these days is impersonating, for example, the CEO and creating an email that looks like it came from the CEO, or a voicemail that came from the CEO, sending it to the financial person, asking them to move money to a particular place, and there's been a lot of companies that have lost a lot of money just because the person didn't pick up the phone and call the boss and say, hey, did you really want me to do this? So just a little bit of skepticism if something seems out of place or not quite right.
Well, thanks for those that great insight too on that, Kevin. And we actually still have time for a few more questions, and we have one that
Excellent.
came in here too. This is kind of an interesting one, kind of looking to the future. You know, the internet is changing quickly. You know, right now we're seeing all the commercials and things about 5G. Just will 5G and maybe future 15G make it more or less dangerous?
You know what? This is a great question. I think I think the technology, the pipe, you know, is it cable? Is it DSL? Is it 4G? Is it 5G? I think it's independent of kind of the security. You know, not to say that those things shouldn't be wrapped in the appropriate security, but whether I'm attacking you over a 5G pipe or over a cable modem or over a 4G pipe or DSL, sort of doesn't matter. So 5G is all about getting more bandwidth, and which is a great, wonderful thing because in this world we really need more bandwidth. You know, but the security and particularly the attacks that you'll see across those pipes, I don't think will substantially change.
Okay. Let's see here. I have a few more. Kind of a specific one that I think a lot of us probably are dealing with right now is Windows 10 Pro with their security good enough against hackers for businesses?
You know, here's what that's a great question. And the answer is, if you're doing, you know, if you're keeping up on the Windows updates and keeping it secured appropriately and using Windows Defender or some other appropriate antivirus, then it's probably good enough for what you're going to get. You know, and again, it's a little bit of that's going to depend on, you know, where does that device sit in the infrastructure. If it's sitting out on the edge of your network and you've connected the internet to that Windows machine directly, well, that's probably not good enough. On the other hand, if that is sitting within your infrastructure and you have a firewall and those other controls in place, then it really probably is good enough. But the important thing, I think, really comes back to the security hygiene. You know, are you updating it? Are you patching it? Are you really taking care of those basics? Because those basics are the kind of things that will really protect you, whether it's Windows Pro or Linux or those kinds of things.
Okay, great. I think we maybe have time for one more question here. And
okay.
And I'm just going to say, well, what are appropriate measures to protect an average home just in today's world with all the connected smart devices and things like that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. You know, one of the links that I provided to Kim as part of my material is there's a new report that just came out from Comcast just a few weeks ago that is really sort of a cyber security health report, and this is based on our observations of living in the network and running our X5 product, and one of the very interesting things that it talks about in that report is the fact that per month your home is being attacked about 104 times. So roughly 3 times a day, somebody's coming, you know, to your virtual home and knocking on the door and trying to get in. You know, they're trying to pick the lock. They're trying to do different things. So you know, as we talk about protecting the home, you know, the first thing again is for the routers and the cable modems and those other things that are the interface from the internet to your home, making sure that they're appropriately updated. You know, maybe a little bit more for a business, but making sure that you have an appropriate firewall in place and that it's being updated and taken care of. You know, those kinds of things. And then within the home, one of the things that we see developing that we think is really good is is this idea of having segregated networks. In other words, as you bring IoT devices into the home, I think that one of the best things we can do is put those on a separate Wi-Fi network, because IoT devices tend to be less secure. And if they can sit on a separate network, from your main devices, your computers, and other things that have your sensitive information, that helps protect those things. So should a bad guy be able to break into your refrigerator, your lights, your Echo Dot, whatever it happens to be, that prevents that from being a pivot point, to get into your really sensitive information that you would have on your computer or your laptop or other devices like that.
Okay, well, thank you. I think those are all great questions and great information that we have heard from Kevin. I think we want to get to some of our other presenters and just maybe virtually thank Kevin again for a great presentation there. I mean, just one question I was curious that you don't really have to answer, Kevin, but I wonder how our neighborhood looks on the Lord of the Rings map behind you. We've talked about all the virtual ways to look at neighborhoods and things, but yeah, that'd be interesting to see too. But let's move on. We've got a couple other presenters, and so it's my great honor, and I'm very pleased to announce our next presenter, Scott Petree. He's a principal at Plante Moran. And as a leader in the firm's information technology consulting practice, Scott assists companies with various assessments of security controls, including data privacy, PCI compliance, and IT infrastructure. With more than 17 years of experience, he advises clients on information system audits, forensic technology, and enterprise risk mitigation in the financial institutions, healthcare, automotive, manufacturing, and government sectors. He has some really cool certifications that includes Certified Information Systems Auditor, Qualified Security Assessor, Certified Fraud Examiner, and CPA. Please help me welcome Scott.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining, and certainly, Kevin, thanks for the insight and sharing with us some of those the information there on cybersecurity, and just wanted to continue that conversation as we move into just more of what we're working with today in kind of that remote working environment. Things that may have changed in your organization and your business as we all had to transition from March to where we're at today, whether you're in still working at the office or having to work from home. We've got potentially mixed environments where you have some individuals that are still having to go to the office to continue to maintain operations, or you may have individuals that are continuing to support you remotely. Processes certainly have changed throughout that period of time, whether that's through approvals. I know at Plante Moran, we had to think differently about how we can get signatures just for tax returns, for example, or how do we pick up documents from our clients. We've had nearly, I think, about 300, and we've got 500 new starts coming here in January. And so we've had to change our processes in deploying technology and things that we often would, just be very simple to have individuals come pick up information, drop off information. We've had to just think of different ways and unique ways to do that. And so as we think about cybersecurity and the way technology interfaces with all of us, potentially you may have changed 2, 3, or all of your computer controls as a result of being able to work from home, if that's the case, or being able to share information remotely now that we've got a more mixed environment. And so just thinking about what those types of controls and what you did, we want to get a little bit into this idea of what can you do? What are some of the things that you as an individual, whether that's for your home network or for your organization's network, things that we can look to increase so that we can keep those bad actors, those cyber criminals that are, as Kevin mentioned, looking to get access to cash. Well, what can we do to prevent those types of activities from happening. And first and foremost really is passwords. And Kevin did touch on this in the area of, maintaining good passwords and good password control. One thought is in that whole idea of not keeping the same password for multiple systems. Just similar, to that is you don't have the same keys to get to different houses, right? We don't all share the same key in order to move from one house to another. We have different keys to get into different places. So you've got a different key to move, to get into your home, then maybe to your office, then to your vehicle, et cetera. Similarly, we'd want to have different passwords for different systems. And password complexity can change from system to system. And if you're an administrator on a workstation or on a server, you may want to have different kinds of passwords or different complexities as you move through systems. Windows, as we talked about Windows 10 just a little bit ago, they actually also have what they're considering PIN encryption. And so you may see when you log into your computer, if you're not joined to a domain and your security policies allow you to, you may have a 4-digit code to get in. And so that certainly is different. It's unique, but it's that whole idea of passwordless access into a system. Well, why is that secure compared to a 15-digit character password? Well, what we forget about when we have those 4-digit codes or a PIN is that the initial, when you initialize that system or that workstation, you actually did have to initialize or authenticate using a stronger password, whether it was a Microsoft account or something, OneDrive account. And then that allowed the system to be authenticated to your account. And the thought is that if you lose that system, you would have to then go deactivate that particular device from your account. So there are ways to have shorter passwords or non-passwordless authentication, just a matter of using some secure practices in that notion. When we think of passwords and how they're cracked or decrypted, one thing that we do when we do the penetration testing, when we encounter an encrypted password, we run it through what we call a password rig. And a password rig is really an advanced server that takes computer graphics cards. So these graphics cards are the types of things that run PlayStations or sophisticated gaming systems. And we take not just one graphics card and not two, but we can daisy chain. In our rig, we've got 5 password graphics cards, rather, daisy chained together. And each of those graphics cards can guess up to 800 million times per second on how to actually decrypt a password. And so if you've got 5 of those together, that's over 4 billion, if I did the math right, instances of trying to guess a password. And so when we do that, you can easily see if you have a weak password, why that might not work so well against a powerful GPU. And the bad actors, they can do multiple, beyond 5. There really isn't a limit. And if you have multiple graphics cards connected or multiple systems, that's why we see a lot of passwords being cracked. We took a look, just a quick look at some of the common passwords. I know Kevin had shared the top 20 passwords for 2020. And if anybody noticed in there, 1, 2, 3, 4 was still there. But we took a look at them from our systems. We scrubbed out the easy ones. We didn't want to put the ones that were super, declarative of a client or an individual. About 130 of them, 38% of them actually still use the U.S. dictionary word straight through, no spacing, no pauses, and no different letters. 26% of them started or began with a number. So if you used, summer 2020, for example, or now that it's winter, you might use winter 2020. Those were 26%. And then they had about 11%, used a common name that would be easily identified, whether you're looking at social media sites or something like that. And then this idea of swapping characters for numbers and letters. Today, in that programmatic way, to be able to decrypt a password, systems can exchange the letter E, for example, with the number 3, or if you're swapping the S's for $signs, right? That was kind of common practice a while back, but that can easily be decrypted in a quick manner or programmed in a quick manner. So as you think about passwords, just consider more complexity, less using of dictionary words or single space dictionary words or smaller dictionary words, and really think through more about passphrases. And so something that more can either answer a question, or you can put something larger in there, based on either characters. So there's other ways to kind of create some of those things. Other things you can do for security is making sure that your data is backed up. And so as we know, cybersecurity can create opportunity. We don't want that data to be lost. And so whether that's through ransomware, through malware, or through exfiltration of data, make sure your data is being backed up, and not just backed up to a location, but make sure that those backups are successful and that you are able to restore some of those in that data set. We had an instance where individual had been backing up their organizational data. They had a bad actor in their environment. They didn't know it, but the bad actor was actually deleting all of the alert emails. And these alert emails were telling the organization that the data didn't get backed up. And that occurred for a period of time that was greater than what their storage capacity was. And so once that 30 or 60 day window came through, then the bad actor launched ransomware. And so the organization thought they were in good shape, but when they went to go look for their backups, they identified that they had lost the 30 to 60 days of data because the backups weren't occurring and they weren't receiving those alert emails. So make sure that you're not just only receiving the bad or the failed email alerts, but you're also receiving the successful email alerts in those instances. The other thing that you can do, it's important to be able to shut down. It just turns the computer off, obviously, and kind of clears out some of what we call temporary memory. But it also, as you reboot the next day, it can help the computer go through its normal cycle of checking for updates. And especially if it's a computer that's on a company network, or if you're going through VPN to a company network, that's one common way IT organizations are sending updates to the PC. So I know it's easier, especially in a remote environment, just to get up and leave, and maybe you don't get back to your computer until the next day. But go ahead and at least try to reboot that PC, shut it down at least a couple times a week throughout the process. And certainly if IT is letting you know too, that you've got updates, make sure that you're applying those. Another thing, just even though you're at home or you might be working remotely, even if you're working from, prior to the COVID pandemic, you might be working at a Starbucks. Just always watch for prying eyes. There's always other people that might be interested in knowing what you're doing. Cover your keyboard to some extent if you're, putting in passwords. I've got 2 sons, and every time they look through to get me to put my password in, I have them leave the room, and they kind of still laugh at me for trying to do that. But keeping those passwords secure, keeping your system secure is certainly important, and making sure that confidential data still maintains some confidentiality, even in the environment that we're working in now. Shredding, certainly important, especially if you're working from home. You may still be printing out information, maybe get some confidential information. If you don't have a shredder, go ahead and look to get some. The ones that, this one actually doesn't show a good shredder. You'd still be able to take these pieces of paper and kind of put it together. One thing that they talk about is putting or is getting what they call a crosscut shredder, where it takes it and puts it into more smaller pieces. So these linear shredders aren't as secure as the ones that are that they cut up into smaller pieces. From the organization's perspective, so if you're working in trying to secure your organization, some things that you can consider to do is prevent some of the devices that are connecting into your organization into VPN. Don't allow them to connect unless they have up-to-date systems and up-to-date software. So there's some things that on VPNs that you can do to do host checking prior to allowing a full connection. And some of that stuff might be things that you would normally do from a login perspective as well. Oops, let me go backwards, sorry. Making sure that you provide secure online storage for your employees or the organization, thinking about transferring data securely and allowing them to, whether it's a collaboration site or a secure cloud storage site, versus sending it via email. You've got approvals via email and you've got invoicing that are going through email. You may end up, because of the phishing, because of the bad actors, that there may be instances where that if your email gets compromised, if that's how you're transferring data, it would be easier then for the bad actors to divert that information, modify it, and then send it back in an inappropriate way. Another thing you can think about doing, especially when we're thinking about data transfers, is encrypting any of those portable media devices, or even disabling USB drives altogether, so that you're not allowing individuals to be able to take data off of their computer systems and transferring data in a insecure manner. A few things to consider as you think about some do's and don'ts, and actually shared some of this information with Kim as well. So I'm not sure if that kind of got passed on to you from materials, but there's a number of things that we can do for enhancing cybersecurity, and some things that you kind of want to avoid. When we think about administrator accounts, these are the keys to the kingdom, if you will. These are the accounts that allow organizations to create users, modify data, be able to edit data. So these administrator accounts are really the keys to your organization, and you want to make sure that they're protected. And so one thing you can do is make sure you change that default password. Back in the summer, there was a number of home routers that were being compromised because a lot of the router or the administrator passwords at the home weren't being changed. And this was a software update that came out probably in a couple of years back in 2018. And so some of these devices, because they were still continued to have the default password, were compromised, and then things happened on those devices that that you really didn't want to occur. Changing or making sure that administrative password is strong and secure. We talk about more than 12 characters sometimes, even up to 15 character passwords for administrators would be a positive thing. Things around viruses, making sure that you check your website before you go to it, or check any of those the links that people are sending you. If you've got some technology in place, you can do some pre-checking. Some of the email and web content filtering today allows you to strip out some of those emails prior to actually landing them in a user inbox. Some of the other technologies are pre-screening the website as a user does click on the link. It'll pre-screen that website, and then deliver the site if it's reported to be good, or not allow the site if it's a bad site or considered a bad site. Making sure that user workstations maintain good antivirus or current antivirus software. I think Kevin mentioned that there's a number of patches that come out on systems, and the hackers after that they learn all the bugs and all the, the things that they can go try to do. And so Patch Tuesday is what it's called, but then the hackers consider Wednesday to be Hacking Wednesday. So watch for those updates on Tuesdays and make sure that your systems are keeping up to date for protection. Making sure for confidential data that, again, that you have a storage location, you're encrypting that transmission, you're encrypting the data that you have, and then keeping up with frequent backups as well. And we talked a little bit about phishing emails. Kevin mentioned that. I think today's phishing email is much more sophisticated. There aren't as many bad grammar types of emails. You don't see the weird or the odd looking subject line, but just watch for those and continue training for your users to be able to spot those. There's a number of technology and training programs that are out there to keep users aware and keep them on their toes as well. Chris, back to you.
Okay, thanks for that, Scott. And what we're going to do here is between Scott and we have another presenter, Becca. Scott presented. Becca's going to do a presentation on some topics, and then Scott's going to come back. And then what we'll probably do is have some time after Scott presents another time to answer questions and things like that. And so with that, I'm going to introduce another one of my associates, Becca Pastor. And so I'm pleased to introduce Becca. She's a senior IT consultant at Plante Moran. Becca has provided IT services to clients in various industries, including software as a service, financial institutions, healthcare, and higher education. Becca routinely performs testing of system and organization controls, what's referred to as SOC, Sarbanes-Oxley, IT general controls, and HIPAA compliance related controls. Throughout her experience, Becca has worked with various IT security control frameworks, including NIST 800, FFIEC, GLBA, all these acronyms are fun, HIPAA. Becca's experience includes assessing controls within service organizations and reporting upon the design and operating effectiveness of controls in accordance with applicable regulatory standards. So please help me welcome Becca.
Thanks, Chris. So for the purposes of this presentation, I think Scott and Kevin have brought us to a point where we're pretty aware of the security around data in this world, and especially looking at the security that has changed, and I guess the requirements that have grown as a result of remote working in 2020. But I guess the question that I would have for the audience would be, and obviously no answers, but what do we do whenever we're looking at that data and that data is kind of outsourced to a third party? How do we get comfortable that that third party has the proper security controls around the data? How do we know that it's operating effectively, that there have been no issues with the data that we're trusting them with that essentially belongs to us? So I know it's probably getting to the point where a lot of organizations are going to be assessing the current vendors that they have, maybe reinitiating new contracts or performing vendor risk assessments coming into the 2021 year. So a good component that is involved within that vendor risk assessment process is a SOC report. So kind of a quick overview of the objectives when it comes to reviewing SOC reports here. But to kind of get us at a level playing ground, what is a SOC report? SOC stands for System and Organization Controls. And essentially it enables companies to feel confident that service providers or potential service providers are operating in an ethical and compliant manner. You can see in this box on the right, there's numerous different types of SOC reports. It kind of looks like a little bit of an alphabet soup, but essentially throughout the presentation, I'll go over the most common types of SOC reports, what you can expect with, a type 1 versus type 2 that you see up here. But really, why would you use a SOC report when assessing vendor risk? And really, that SOC report is going to give a service provider an assessment of their control operating design and effectiveness by an independent auditor. And the way that I kind of look at it in more basic terms is, you have a lot of valuables in your home. If you leave and you need someone to watch your house, how can you trust that that person who's house sitting is really going to, just come take care of your dogs, take care of your plants, make sure everything's good? You're kind of giving them the keys to the kingdom. And in that case, if you can, in that case, I might go to my neighbors and I might ask, do you know anyone that you can trust? It's kind of similar to looking at an independent auditor and saying, they opined upon their controls, their control posture, and we can kind of, trust that they're operating in a more secure manner, and we can trust them with our data. So in turn, organizations can use a SOC report when performing assessments, when performing an assessment against the vendors and the vendor risk, and really it's a type of way that you can use the report to monitor how your vendors are processing your data. So before we kind of jump into the most common types of SOC reports, there is a big difference between a type 1 report and a type 2 report. So the type 1 report is, it's really just going to be a point in time report. You're going to be looking at the controls as of a certain date. In these types of reports, it's a lot more common to see a type 1 if a service provider is kind of getting a little bit more comfortable with the SOC process. They might be a little bit new. So if you get a type 1 report, I wouldn't have any concerns, but I would say within the next year, I would expect a type 2 report. And so for a type 2 report, that's going to be an audit of the controls that operate over a period of time. In this case, if you're looking at, one example would be monthly user access reviews. If you're looking at a type 1 report, you might just look at one example of a recent user access review. And it kind of shows that the control is designed to be effective, but we don't really know if it's effective or not. In a type 2 report, you might see a test by the auditor of numerous months to make sure, it passed every single month. These user access reviews are designed and they're operating effectively. So moving on to the most common types of SOC reports, there are two. A SOC 1 is really just going to address, it's going to be an audit of a third-party vendor's accounting and financial controls. So as an organization, I would expect to see a SOC 1 report if you are outsourcing some type of your financial reporting functions to a third party, if they're helping you put together your financial statements, kind of getting that comfort to make sure that they have the proper controls in place to secure your data and to provide you with the proper controls really over that financial reporting process. For a SOC 2, I would say SOC 2 is the most common type of report, especially in these days whenever there are a lot more outsourcing of data to third parties. A SOC 2 is going to be examining the controls at a service organization according to the trust services criteria. And the trust services criteria, as followed here, the security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, or privacy. These are really the 5 categories that can be included in a SOC 2 report, but it's not necessarily required that all 5 are included. It's going to be up to the service provider to determine which ones kind of fall within the umbrella of the services that they provide, but security will always be included with that. It's based on the COSO principles, and with a SOC 2 report, you're going to have multiple controls to achieve each type of objective. We won't go into that much detail, but to just differentiate between that SOC 1 and the SOC 2. That SOC 2, if you're relying on your vendor to process data, maybe for an outsourced IT managed services, I would definitely expect to see a SOC 2 there. So then once we get the SOC report, and you might be getting more than one, once you get that SOC report, it's going to be at least 80 to 100 or more pages, a lot of information to dig through there, and it can be cumbersome if you have multiple SOC reports to review. So something to kind of highlight within these 5 sections here, these are the 5 sections that you're going to see in every single SOC report. Section 1 here, the independent service auditor's report, that's where you're going to find the opinion of the report. It's really the results of the review. For those familiar with audit language, that's where you're going to see that unqualified opinion. definitely the opinion that you want to see, but nonetheless, if you do see that qualified or disclaimer or adverse, it's something that might affect your vendor risk assessment process. So it's definitely an important section for section 1. Section 2, it's not as relevant. Management assertion letter, just management, the service provider confirming their controls are as they're stated in the report. Section 3 is kind of the bread and butter of the report, I would say. It's the vendor's description of the system. So if you're outsourcing your controls or some of your IT infrastructure to a service provider, you're going to see section 3 is going to highlight pretty much everything that goes into that system to help maintain it. So you can kind of understand the governance over that system, how the company is set up, certain people and processes and technology that are included to help keep that system operating. But one key item that's always included in section 3, if there are any, is complementary user entity controls. And these are the type of controls that as the service provider, they rely on you as the organization to also have in place in order to meet that control. An example, a very easy example of this is, if you're outsourcing to a data center and you're granting some access of your employees to that data center, you might be responsible for notifying them if you have an employee that's terminated. And so that would be a complementary user entity control. If you're performing that vendor risk assessment and you kind of want to understand, what do we need to have in place to make sure that our vendor can have their controls in place, I would definitely take a look at section 3. This will be clearly spelled out, and this is where you might want to focus some of your vendor risk assessment in accordance with your controls posture to make sure that you're also achieving some of those controls to make sure that you're achieving that secure environment, really. Section 4 is going to be a listing of all the controls tested. So once you receive that SOC report, if you want to kind of understand, I know the controls I have at my organization, but what is my vendor doing? What controls do they have in place? And what did this auditor test to make sure that, when I'm doing my vendor risk assessment, I'm looking at the right controls? That's going to be clearly spelled out in section 4. It's probably going to be the longest section, but a lot of the information that you're going to want to understand around the controls is going to be in section 3 with the company, that as well. And then section 5, also an important section, although I will say that as a SOC provider, we do not opine upon any information in section 5. This is more of an opportunity for the service provider to provide information about how they manage their business continuity plans or how they maintain compliance with GDPR. Another important component of section 5 is if there are any deviations to controls or exceptions or maybe controls that didn't pass that were not operating effectively, a lot of times management will provide their responses to the controls, how they were mitigated or remediated within section 5. So while you're reviewing SOC reports, if you do come across an opinion that might be qualified or even not qualified, take a look at section 5, make sure that there aren't any controls, and if there are controls that management did remediate some of those deviations, because some of those controls might be important to the operation of your business. So as a SOC provider, we see numerous different reports. We see different organizations and how they're performing their vendor risk assessments. When I'm performing a SOC report, I'm also, testing my clients on if they're reviewing the SOC reports of the service providers that they use. After reviewing a lot of the different methodologies of vendor risk assessment, there are a few common questions that you see, and it's definitely good to see whenever you're looking at the different SOC reports. So who issued the report? That's kind of up to the organization if it's a material information to assess, who's doing the SOC report. What is the auditor's opinion, like we just discussed? That's going to be important to kind of assess if you need to bump that vendor risk a little bit higher. If that report wasn't unqualified, if it was qualified, you might need to make sure that you're putting a little bit of additional monitoring in place to make sure that vendor is going to be complying with those controls that you rely on. What's the scope of the report? You're outsourcing some of these services to a third party. Does this report cover that entire scope? if you're outsourcing IT managed services, but they're only testing their firewall management, you might want to go back to the vendor and ask, some of the additional services that weren't included in the report, ask them some questions on how they're maintaining controls around that. But essentially that scope of the report, all of these questions you're going to find in section 1. That's also going to include the time frame of the report, which is really important when you're doing vendor risk assessment. If you get a time frame of the report and it's from January 1st only through October 31st, you're going to want to understand, why is there a little bit of a gap between November 1st and December 31st? A lot of times clients can give you a gap letter for that, but it's definitely something to keep aware of to make sure that, the report's only going to be good for that period of time. And then were there any relevant exceptions noted? Obviously, you're relying on this vendor to secure your data as well. So are they doing that? Where were some of the issues noted, and what is that impact on your service that you're relying on this vendor for when performing that vendor risk assessment? So common questions we see in section 3. What was included in the audit? What kind of individuals or departments did we talk with? What additional tools are used to support the system? The scope of the audit might be limited to that system that you're outsourcing, but they might also use, SolarWinds as an example. And if anyone heard about the recent hack with SolarWinds, it's good to look back on your SOC report and understand, is my vendor using SolarWinds, and how did they kind of remediate some of those issues with SolarWinds with that recent hack? And then what third parties does your organization utilize? If you're outsourcing IT managed service, and then they're also outsourcing to a third-party data center, that's going to be, that third-party data center might be defined in section 3. So it's going to give you a little bit more of that breadth and depth of knowledge into your service organization's, business and structure, and how they're maintaining their services that they're providing to you. And then, like we discussed before, those complementary user entity controls, definitely really important, especially if they're relying on you to have those controls in place, something to be aware of, and make sure that those controls at your organization are operating as well. And then in section 4, what are the controls supporting the system in scope? If you're ever doing a vendor risk assessment and you are relying on a certain subset of specific controls for them to have in place, section 4 is going to help give you the answer to that. So those are the key points of focus really when looking at a SOC report. I know you can get numerous SOC reports, like I said, with hundreds of pages, but hopefully this helps kind of give everyone a little bit more ease into that process. You don't have to necessarily read all 100 pages unless you like SOC that much. But you can certainly use some of these key points and understand, sections 1, 3, and 4, sometimes 5 are going to be where a lot of that information to assess that risk associated with your vendor are. And then moving on to the other types of SOC reports, some organizations might provide a SOC 3. I know the most common one I might say is AWS. They have a SOC 3 report available on their website. The purpose of a SOC 3 report is really all of those sections that we looked at before, except there's no section 4 or section 5. So it's really just going to be made available for public use. If the service provider is a very large company and they have a lot of clients asking them for SOC reports, sometimes it's a little bit easier to just post a SOC 3 report on the website so the individuals can gain access with more ease, really. And then a SOC for supply chain. This one's a little bit newer. It's a reporting framework really to help organizations communicate information about their supply chain process. An independent assessor will come in and kind of assess those risk management efforts and the effectiveness of system controls to make throughout that entire supply management process. And SOC for cybersecurity, it's definitely a growing path to go down. It's really an auditor would come in, assess an organization's cyber risk management program, and opine upon those controls. So SOC for cybersecurity, I wouldn't necessarily say falls within all service organizations that process data, but it's really going to be if you're relying on them for a component of your cyber risk management program. You're definitely going to want to understand if they've gotten a SOC report done, or if they're considering getting one done. So I think that covers everything that we wanted to go over for SOC reporting. I know that I have QA here, but I think, Chris, we were going to wait until after Scott to maybe ask some questions.
Yes. Yeah, that is correct. And I think what we're going to do now is transition back to Scott and have him. He's going to talk a little bit about the do's and don'ts of cybersecurity, and so maybe some actionable type things that folks can deal with and so forth. And I was just going to take a minute and appreciate Becca's presentation on SOC and in SOC reports and things. And for a lot of folks in the audience, you might be wondering, how does this relate to me? But I'll give you one practical area where it may not be something you're paying for or you're having to worry about. But if for anybody that has 401k plans for their people, the providers that provide you the services, they get SOC reports, and you should be reviewing those to understand what kind of controls they have around transactions and transferring money and getting money here and there and so forth. And so I would really encourage you to look at that and take some of the knowledge that Becca just expressed to look at some of those kinds of reports. But without further ado, let me turn it over back to Scott, and he's going to talk about the do's and don'ts of cybersecurity.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Becca, for going through that. I know we covered these slides just a little bit. I was kind of going a little fast with them. I thought I'd revisit these and then go through some other areas of things that you can do as an organization. One thing we missed here in this slide is checking administrative activity. So when we have administrators in the system, what we want to make sure that their activities are monitored. And so sometimes what we see is an activity review that occurs within the organization just to ensure that admin access is being used properly. And so this is the whole idea of who's checking the administration of the administrators. And so is it somebody that can really hear or can really see what's going on, and are they able to review that activity properly? And then the other one there is not using administrative accounts for non-administrative activity. So this is a little bit, easier said than done. It's really taking a user. So if they're an administrator, instead of just having a single user account, they may have two accounts. One that's often labeled admin, so it might be Scott_admin, and then another user account where it's just Scott. And both those accounts are assigned to me. And then in the one instance, I'm using specifically for my administrative duties, whether that's logging in to a system, to do troubleshooting, maybe remote accessing to a workstation to be able to help a user out, or it might be I'm using my standard account to check emails, check on workflows, my typical activities versus my administrative duties. One thing that the reason why you might want to do that is when systems are logged into, or if you access resources, that particular account credentials get passed throughout the network. And if that administrative password, as we talked about earlier, isn't strong or isn't as strong as it can be compromised and then taken offline to attempt to decrypt. And so if you can imagine limiting the number of times that password gets shared on your network would be better overall for the organization. Viruses, I think we talked enough about those. Just making sure that your users keep an eye on where they're visiting the websites, and then the types of files they're downloading. And again, just being careful with USBs that are offered to them with data, if that's still something, a common practice in your organization. Confidential information, again, just making sure that you're not transmitting some of that data over unsecure networks, and looking at using some kind of secure repository, whether that's the company collaboration site, SharePoint sites, even Google offers a number of products there. Now, certainly using a non-corporate Google might not be your best advantage in this current state as well. Again, when we talk about phishing emails, I think it really talks to social engineering, and really it's anything with the human element where we're looking at email, phone calls, or physical things that you want to make sure that you're looking for in the email itself are some of those header lines, looking at who's it coming from, what is that URL that's on the bottom there to click. Is that something that looks appropriate given the context of the email itself? And so you can train users again to hover over that link, check that out, and then, as I mentioned, you can have some technologies that do some filtering prior to the email coming into the user's inbox, or if you have the ability to check that the website as the user clicks on the link, it may go through a process to validate that that's a proper website to keep from a user from going to a bad site. Other things that we happen to see even just this past summer with Twitter is in the area of social engineering is really training your users, and if you have individuals that are taking phone calls, and teaching them that not to give away or not to provide passwords. And so in the case of Twitter, it was understood that individuals called and through social engineering and just the phone call, they were able to reset a number of Twitter accounts and then use that to launch phishing emails to valid users and to followers. And in that instance, what we found was that when that phishing email came, it came from the right account, it came from the user. But what led to that one, or what was the telltale sign, was that it was asking for digital currency, and then using that to convert to traditional funds. And so if any of those instances, if you've got requests for digital currency or any kind of foreign currency, oftentimes that can lead to warning signs for phishing. Other things that can happen is, don't just, what's the right word? Don't always just accept this warning sign. So sometimes this happens quite a bit, especially if you've got some remote systems or you've got some out-of-date software. And what happens is, as you maintain, or as users see this and you're not maintaining your systems, the more times you see this, it really can desensitize the user. And then all of a sudden, this warning sign really is for installing malware onto the workstation. And so what we want to do is keep those systems up to date, make sure that when users are seeing these types of warning signs, that they're actually taking action and not just blindly clicking on allow. This is another one when you're going to a website, and Kevin mentioned the whole HTTP versus HTTPS. If you're going to a website and your users are not looking for secure sites, or if they're not paying attention, that particular icon up on the top, sometimes you see a lock symbol. In this case, you can see that the HTTPS has been line through it and it's red. And then you can even see that this one gave a specific warning that the site isn't private. So you want to train your users to be able to spot unsecure or insecure websites as well, in the organization, so that when they're going to log into, let's say, your banking account or into any of your portals, your software as a service portals, if all of a sudden that link does not show a secure connection, it may be because either the computer is rerouting to an incorrect website, or they may have typed the wrong address in. And because there's so many different websites out there that are trying to gain access, it might be the wrong specific vendor to be able to log in. And if they're not looking for those kinds of telltale signs, they may be looking at a bad actor. The other thing, this is a notorious Microsoft type of error message or warning message. The challenge with these two messages is that they're so similar. One, allows you to actually edit the document. And then the other, if you look closely, it says enable content. And if you're not kind of paying attention to either of these two messages, a user may inadvertently enable content, and that's where a macro could be attached to the Word file or to the Excel file or to any of the Microsoft products, and then that because there's an executable associated with that, or potentially there could be malware then or a virus that can get onto your workstation. And so this was pretty, if you recall the I love you bug or some of those older viruses that came through a while back, it was because when Word opened up initially, there wasn't a warning like this. It just automatically on open executed code, and then end users were sending out emails inadvertently. In the similar context, if you enable content, what the bad actors can do now is they can connect remotely to the workstation through scripting. And so when we do testing, that's one of our tests for phishing emails is, will a user, 1, click on the link, 2, download the file, and then 3, enable content, 2, see, and then in this case, it might be, gain access to a certificate that allows you to get, free coffee, or sometimes we send some fun ones where it's enable a gift certificate for, for some achievement that they had. So looking for those two types of warning signs and treating your users to make sure that they're not, inadvertently clicking the wrong one is certainly something to watch out for as well. Some things that you can do, just ask, I think we talked a little bit, Kevin had mentioned, or there was a question about what can organizations do. And so, thinking about some areas or some questions that you can ask, are we properly identifying the risk within the organization? Do we know where our systems, where the data lives in our systems? Are we using a lot of cloud computing? Do we need to be getting those SOC or SOC reports, as Becca mentioned? Do we need to look at other third-party service providers that may have confidential information, and really evaluating what that risk looks like for the organization? And then once you know what that where the systems and data live, it's a matter of then understanding what are the protections that we need in place to continue to treat that data as secure. Are we compliant with organization standards and regulatory requirements? Do we have a compliance aspect to the organization or to the data that we're receiving? So if we're receiving European data, let's say, or if you've got customer information that goes beyond just the name and the products that they might be purchasing. So if you've got home address, you might have IP addresses for your customers that visit your website and maybe are transacting on your website. You may have credit card information. And so just understanding what those regulatory compliance measures are, and looking at, what can you do in those aspects, certainly would be something to keep up to date. Make sure you're documenting in the policies and procedures so that those types of things are being followed throughout the organization. And then, completing or performing auditing practices to ensure that you maintain and monitor or maintain compliance with those regulatory compliance areas. And then just making sure that your systems are secure and properly configured. And we talked a little bit about this on your workstation level, making sure that your workstation stays up to date by rebooting and looking at your antivirus and those kinds of things. But for your organization and your network, every single system component that lives on the network, either has a vendor update or vendor security updates that come through. You may have software updates. You may have some application updates. So each of those layers, you just want to look at and make sure that they're staying consistent and with the most current security standards that you have available for each of those devices. And then making sure that you've got physical safeguards in place. So again, if you got that information, if you identified that the information lives in your corporate offices or lives in maybe a data center, just ensuring that you have the proper physical safeguards in place so that, as Kevin mentioned, the whole aspect of physical social engineering is still an option, to gain access to company data or company organizational information. So keeping those safeguards in place are still very relevant. And then looking at administrative safeguards. So those are the admin passwords and those kinds of things. Just keeping those up to date would be, very important as well. A few other questions to ask. Our systems access authorized and privileged granted based on least privileges. And so this one's a little bit harder to say. So this one really talks about, segregation of duties. Do we have the right people accessing the right information? And are we making sure that we have individuals, keeping data secure, and that we have proper authorization and access controls to systems and system data. So this might mean that not everybody becomes an administrator on your systems. Not everybody needs to be an administrator. One thing we find on end user workstations, especially, is that most of us are local admins and on the workstation itself, and so that can be problematic. It can also be part of ways to distribute new software to the workstation. But because of that, it also can be ways for organizations to encounter malware and viruses that can be loaded onto the workstation, and through that user account really be enacted and enabled. So consider, limiting or restricting what we call local administrator access to workstations could be something to consider here. Are we properly managing third parties? Again, are we getting those SOC reports and looking at contracts? Do we have the right contracts and protections in place when we think about third parties? That can be very critical. Are we looking at business associate agreements if we're dealing with healthcare information? And then making sure that you've got proper oversight in the vendor area. So this might mean on an annual basis, doing vendor due diligence, looking at the organization's financials, reviewing your contract, making sure that they have the proper data security standards in place. You might send them an information security questionnaire, those kinds of things, depending on the type of vendor you have and the type of data that they're enacting on. Do we have the right IT strategy in place? And so this is really thinking through, do we have the right technology to support our business, but also do we have the right technology to help our end users maintain data security? So if we have individuals accessing systems remotely, do we have the right VPN in place? Do we have protections in place that allow or might prevent somebody from installing software that we really don't want? A while back there was remote desktop software that it was pretty common in the IT space, but it wasn't secure, and so that kind of software still continues to pop up because end users they like to sometimes they like to work around IT and they'll find a solution. But if you're not providing that right solution, whether it's connectivity or storage or data transfer, certainly end users will figure something out, and it may not be as secure as you'd like them to be. And then lastly, are we receiving periodic communication and updates on your cybersecurity program? Are you looking at areas where you can improve and take a look at dashboards or monitoring metrics? The statistic that Kevin mentioned there for home networks, having over 3 times a day somebody's knocking on that front door. I know we get at least 3 or 4 UPS packages now lately being delivered, but I couldn't imagine that happening every single day and someone trying to, gain access to the computer systems. And that number just gets higher when you look at corporate networks as well. That the number is probably very astonishing if you think about the number of failed rules or rules that your firewall is protecting on a daily basis. Can be pretty frightening, and thank goodness we have firewalls in place to be able to prevent and protect that information. But just getting that information is helpful, and it continues to show the organization is doing what they're supposed to do to prevent data security or to prevent a data breach or data event from occurring, and continuing to increase that security, that cybersecurity posture, as we talked about. So what can you do? Basic things. Assign somebody that is in the organization that can be responsible to address cybersecurity. I think just having somebody responsible that's thinking about it, whether that's their full-time job or if it's that's part of their current roles and responsibilities. Sometimes what we see is that that lands on IT, and that can be a pretty tough burden, and it's hard to maintain both the operational side of an organization as well as security. So having maybe somebody a little bit outside of that IT space consider looking at cybersecurity and making sure that you've got strong policies and procedures in place to prevent and detect some of the cyber events that are occurring. Would be helpful. Conduct a risk assessment again. Understand where your information is, and look at those systems. Look at those vendors. Are you supposed to look at the SOC report on an annual basis? Look at those. Look at the vendor contracts. Make sure that you have good protections in place in those instances as well. And then Kevin mentioned this as well. Review your plans. Right now, we see a lot of organizations taking time to update their business continuity plan, their incident response plans, their disaster recovery plans, because the organization structure may have changed. Again, if you have more remote workers, or you have a different environment than you had in prior to March, realistically, that your business continuity probably got turned upside down, and you may not be doing anything that you had originally planned in your business continuity plans. But certainly now is a good time to review those, take a look, update them, and include the right communication channels there to keep everybody informed. Fourth one there, conduct security assessments. That's certainly important. That really just tells the organization that the things that you're doing to prevent, and the policy procedures in place, the training that you've done with your employees, those are all working properly. When you do assessments, it really gives you good insight into where the organization's really at, a scorecard, if you will, of how the organization is doing overall with cybersecurity, with controls. You may have to do assessments because of your compliance areas. So those are also very important to do to maintain, whether it's a contract term or if it's to maintain certain kinds of data transactions throughout the organization. And then lastly, but not certainly not least, is continue to train your users, continue to teach them, share with them the risks that are occurring, make sure they understand their value in this whole the ecosystem of securing our virtual neighborhood, to borrow Kevin's term. Make sure that they understand what their contributions are and where their risks are when they're sharing or interacting with organizational data. So training end users can be extremely important. We see quite a bit of end users being able to identify and really pick out cybersecurity events and help the organization be protected. Unfortunately, we see the flip side too, where the end users are the cause or the source of those bad actors coming into the organization. But using those shared experiences really can help reduce that risk as well. Okay. Chris, back to you.
Okay, well, we do have some time for questions, we do have time for questions for both Scott and Becca. So maybe Scott, let me start with you. We are a small company. How do you recommend we keep up with changes to cybersecurity?
Yeah, certainly. So when we're dealing with smaller organizations and not necessarily in the sense of revenue, but more in the resources. So maybe you don't have 5 or 6 IT professionals, and you don't have the ability to what we call separate out some of the administrative activities. One thing that you can look at is certainly asking for help. Look at your current vendors that you do have in place. Sometimes the IT vendors that are helping you maintain and monitor your systems, they actually have cybersecurity products that they can add on to those current services. So looking at that may help those organizations be able to leverage the technology that's out there and see what's available for their organization. The other thing you can do is really consider the access to the internet. So if we're thinking about cybersecurity, does everybody need access to the internet to be able to get inundated with some of the traffic that's coming through? And so there are opportunities where you can limit users if they don't need to have public internet access, whether that's through email or going online. That might be an opportunity. But certainly looking at outsourced vendors, leveraging technology, and then looking at your current vendors as a starting point would help out.
Okay, well, thank you. Becca, I've got one question for you. Is there a source to receive those SOC reports? I mean, if I wanted to find out about a vendor or find out about how do I get a SOC report?
Yeah, so SOC reports are actually probably going to come from your vendors. After they have the SOC report completed, that will, as an auditor, will provide it to the to the service provider. And then it's kind of up to them to distribute it to their customers. Sometimes if you have a great service provider, they might give you their SOC report right as soon as they get the report. But a lot of times as the customer, you'll want to reach out to your service provider and request that SOC report. It's not really made widely available to the public. Unless it's a SOC 3, then those are usually for the purposes of putting it on their website. But if you're looking for a source to get that SOC report, I would go to your service provider and request it through your main contact.
Okay, great. Thank you. Scott, another question for you, just around, or maybe anybody can answer this one too, just around the passwords. We've talked a lot about passwords today, and there's these password management software out there. I would say, what do you recommend there? And then I'll have a follow-on question to that. So let's just start with that. What are your thoughts on password management software, and what do you recommend?
Yeah, certainly. I use them. I don't use them for everything. I think there's certainly when you think about what you're putting in there, just consider that it's still protected information. It's still something that, unfortunately, like the current SolarWinds breach that happened, or security event that happened, things can get compromised. So what you put in there is probably more important than in how you want to store that information. So maybe you don't put every single password, to your financial systems, if you will, into that password manager, or you're not using that for your most sensitive, account information for your organization. But maybe you're using it for some of the one-off systems that you have to log into, or sites, those hundreds and hundreds of sites that we all visit and have to store passwords. the other thing to consider is that the password really at some point maybe doesn't matter as much, and you can use them as one-time passwords, especially if you have the ability to what we call self-service, and that's when you can click on that forget password and then just throw in a one-time password. but really consider securing more of those security questions, and really protecting those security questions in the event that you have to have your account reset, or if you think that there might be some bad activities going on. And so just consider what kind of account you're storing there. And then I'd much prefer to have password managers that are local to the workstation versus the ones that are on the web, through cloud providers, those kinds of things too. So that might be something else to consider.
Okay, thanks. Kind of a follow on to that. You kind of answered it a little bit. Just what are the dangers of having all my unique passwords stored in the cloud? And in addition to that, should I allow my phone or web browser to remember my passwords? Kind of two questions there, Scott.
Yeah, so certainly when we're thinking about corporate systems, we often look at if it's sensitive data, we don't want that user to be able to click on remember my password. And so that might be a setting that you have to think about at the application level versus at the user level. So thinking through that process, I would say that if it's a critical system, you probably don't want to have that password stored. And the reason for that is, in the event that system gets compromised and even lost, the physical device gets lost. Now you have a user that you don't know who has that computer be able to log into a number of your websites just through going through your history. So just protecting that information would be important to consider. Some of your other websites, again, if it's we end up going to our school's website quite a bit to be able to view some information for my two sons' classrooms. Maybe that's a password that you can store in the browser because you don't want to have to keep remembering what it is or have to reset it each time. But I think the challenge that we all face is that idea of security over convenience. It's way more convenient to click that button to say save my password, but is it secure? And so just considering that, what could go wrong situation. And in our world, we always think about the risk. What's the risk to that if we do store it and save it? So, and the other thing when you ask about the risk to the cloud providers, it's just that it's, the convenience is that you can get to those passwords at any device, any location, and you don't have to be at your home PC, if you will, if that's where you end up storing your passwords. But the risk is that if that cloud provider does have a security breach, then you've got to consider, well, how many passwords did I put in there? What password account and what accounts are actually there? And then what do I need to change? So just be careful through that process as well.
Okay, thank you, Scott. I think one last question maybe for Becca that came from the audience was just, and I don't know if this would be an easy question to answer, but what is an average cost of a SOC 2 or 3 report, and how often should they be done?
Yeah, Chris, I'll do my best with this one, but I would say for a SOC 2 and SOC 3, it's a wide range depending on which organization and which firm you're really going with to perform that SOC audit. And in addition with that, there's so many different factors and components that go into a SOC 2 or a SOC 3. Typically, when you get that SOC 2, if you want to get a SOC 3, it might be an increase in fees, but not a material amount. I wouldn't expect, because it's typically going to reflect a lot of the SOC 2. So if we want to focus on that SOC 2 itself, a lot of the components that go into, what are the trust services criteria and scope and how many controls are we testing, and what is the maturity of the organization? If you have gotten a SOC report done in the past, that definitely helps, because we can, as an audit firm, we can assess, the prior year report, we can understand the control structure, how many controls we would be testing, how many scopes are in system, and kind of analyze the time and effort that would go into that. I will say that if you're getting a SOC report done, or if you're considering it and you've never gone through the process before, it's very typical to go through what we would call a readiness assessment, where we would work with the organization to assess their control posture, maybe identify some gaps to where they might want to work on some controls to get it to a baseline maturity level. Then you would move on to that type 1 typically. And then after you go through the readiness and the type 1, then you would go through a type 2. So depending on where the organization is at with your control, like I said, control posture and the governance of those controls, those fees are gonna really be dependent on that information. And of course you can work with different audit firms to kind of figure out what would fit best with the organization to achieve that SOC report.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Well, there might be a few questions that we didn't get to, and what I know, I'll speak for my associates. We're happy to follow up, and if Kim wants to forward those questions to us, we can try to be responsive to those. But I think we've hit our 10 o'clock in time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and just want to maybe hand it over to Kim to kind of wrap up our summit.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. See if I can do this the right way here. I just want to say thank you. A big thank you to everyone joining us today at home, and then a big thank you to our presenters. So thank you to Kevin at Comcast, Scott, Becca at Plante Moran, and then a big thank you to Chris for being our MC today. Again, we can't do this without the support of our sponsors. So another big shout out to Brock & Company and Plante Moran, our gold sponsors, Comcast, our silver sponsor, our bronze sponsor, Milner Technologies, and our event sponsors, Alpha Graphics, Better Business Bureau, BizWest, Signorama, and Technical Frameworks. Again, we will have all of these resources on our website at fortcollinschamber.com. Presentations and also the handouts that Scott and Kevin have provided will be posted there. And again, we hope you have hope you've enjoyed everything we've provided. And just remember, it's not if a cyber attack is going to happen, but when. So please do protect your company and yourselves at home. And with that, happy holidays, and we hope you have a wonderful day.